This podcast is brought to you by Deepbridge Capital LLP. Deepbridge is authorised and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. Please note that investments discussed are both illiquid and high risk and won't be suitable for all investors and should be considered as part of a diversified portfolio. The content of this podcast should not be construed as financial or taxation advice. We recommend investors seek appropriate professional financial advice. Any views expressed may no longer be current and may have already been acted upon. Welcome to this latest Deepbridge Discovery Podcast. My name is Andrew Aldridge. The purpose of this podcast is to bring to life the people and the companies behind what we do here at Deepbridge. To that end, I'm delighted to be joined by Dr. Steven Powell, who's CEO of AI-Sight, an investee company within the Deepbridge Innovation SCIS. Steve, great to see you. Thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Great to be here.
Great. So I guess with these podcasts, we always like to start at the beginning. So can you tell us a bit about AI-Sight, how it came to be, and I guess your key objectives as a business?
Yeah, so AI-Sight, as it sounds, is an artificial intelligence business. It's working in the field of ophthalmology, so eye healthcare.
Yep.
It is a spin-out from the University of Liverpool. So the academics in that institution were working on really something revolutionary in artificial intelligence. So bringing together what's called comparative judgment technology and machine learning to create a product or system, benchtop system, given that it was a university, that could interpret retinal images, that is, pictures taken of the back of the eye. And they're pretty commonplace. So if you've been to an optician's, you'll have had a picture taken of the back of your eye. And the interpretation of those images, particularly in what's called the diabetic retinopathy screening program, which is quite a mouthful.
It just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it?
It does. But if you've got diabetes, you are at risk of going blind as a result of having that healthcare condition. In fact, it's the most common cause of blindness now, or it's quickly becoming globally the most common cause of blindness.
Sure.
And the problem is that actually that blindness is preventable, but you've got to catch the diabetic retinopathy, the disease process, at the back of the eye at exactly the right point. So diabetic people go on an annual basis and have a picture taken of the back of their eye. And it's the interpretation of those images that is the complex bit in the pathway. And so you either need an awful lot of human resource to do that, or you need a bit of a really smart kit to be able to support you to do that as a human, make you very efficient. And there are competitors out there using other systems and other products, but they're not as sustainable or green. They're quite GPU intensive, graphic processing unit intensive, chip intensive. And so these guys designed something that's truly green, sustainable, very light GPU use. And then Elizabeth Maitland, myself, and Mark Thorne were brought in as an experienced commercialization team to take those academics on that journey, to take this from the bench to an actual product that we can get out there and sell to mass markets.
So do you want to tell us a bit about your backgrounds then, kind of at this point? That'd be useful.
Yeah, I mean, so by training, I was a hospital consultant. I was a radiologist, but I gave that up nearly a decade ago now to go into healthcare executive positions, and then left the NHS to run various businesses, albeit nearly all of them healthcare related. And that's been an interesting career transition. Most people don't, leave a comfortable hospital consultant job to go and pursue SME type activities, but it's the drive of really wanting to make an impact at scale that gets me up in the morning.
And the tangibility of that impact as well, I guess.
Exactly. And then alongside me, we have Mark Thorne, who is the CFO. He's seasoned healthcare CFO, working in private public sectors for many years. We've got Elizabeth, who is a professor of international business strategy. She's done a lot of consulting in a lot of different markets. And given that this is going to be an international product, it doesn't just fit the UK, it fits a real broad spectrum of nations, then she's a great fit for us. And then on the academic side, we've got Professor Simon Harding, who's a world-leading, world-renowned ophthalmologist who advises the WHO on diabetic retinopathy screening. He was one of the lead academics in this. We've got David Wong, who is a former ophthalmologist, but also a statistical expert who's written what we call the back end of the product. And then we've got Mark Johnson, who's our machine learning expert, who has designed the actual codings and workings of this particular device.
Fantastic. And I guess, one of the great things often from our perspective about university spin-outs is the length of time that the research has taken, etc. I mean, how long were the team working on this prior to kind of even conceptually putting together AI-Sight?
I mean, they've spent their entire careers working on, diseases of the retina and various ways of improving outcomes from those diseases. The actual grant-based research, funded research that led to this innovation has probably taken the best part of 3 years.
Yep, absolutely. It's phenomenal when you think that's kind of what people are effectively investing in, is that research that's there. It's not just a good idea. It's actually something tangible that has been seen and looked at.
That's right. I mean, there is an evidence base to show that this thing is way more sensitive, way more specific, and even more accurate than the humans that are doing the job at the moment. And those publications are in place. Our job obviously is now to take that to a different level and make sure that it's fully regulatory compliant, data compliant, all that kind of stuff, and actually make those sales into those markets.
Yeah. And I guess your background is particularly interesting, I guess, in the sense that you've been there on the front line, if you like, and understanding the two sides of the market and how to then commercialize a company going into the healthcare world.
Yeah, selling into healthcare is really, interesting, and I sell on both sides of the table, which gives me some relatively unique insights. Healthcare people generally don't like being sold to, but in diabetic retinopathy screening, there's an awful lot of outsourced activity to independent providers. They're looking for a neat solution to be able to expand their offering, and coming back to that scarce resource that is, the human resource. They're looking for other ways to be able to provide those services. So it's an interesting mix of who we'll be selling to, nations, healthcare systems, but also independent health sector providers, other distributors, other providers in other nations.
Yeah, brilliant. So what have been the key milestones to date for yourselves at AI-Sight?
Well, I guess there's a bunch of things. One, we had to design the product in a way that it was functional and robust. It works great on the first image. Does it work great on the second image? And what about the 10,000th image? There's a lot of stress testing involved in making sure that the product doesn't fall over when you give it an entire clinic's worth of work. Then it needs to be containerized in a way that it can be taken from the lab bench, if you like, and handed to a commercial development team who are going to wrap the product. It's a bit like, they describe it a bit like putting the chassis around the engine. You've got something that will get you from 0 to 60 in the appropriate amount of time, but now you've got to make sure that it's functional in a way that the graphic user interface is what a user is going to expect, that it's replicable each time, that it's secure, that it can't be hacked, and therefore the results change. So there's an awful lot of things that you perhaps don't necessarily think about initially that need to be put in place. So all of that has been happening to date. Obviously, there's the process of bringing the team together, which is quite interesting, and also aligning the values of the team. There is quite a difference, if you like, between the values held by academic institutions and clinicians and those who are running commercially viable operations, and we mustn't diminish either of those. We've got to provide huge impact to people with diabetes, but we've also got to provide huge shareholder value to those that have, taken the interest and invested in us.
Yeah, and I guess it's trying to find the route where the two things aren't mutually exclusive, that they can work in harness with each other.
Exactly. If you're creating huge value for the people that are actually the end users of the product, then the shareholder value will come with you in spades. So that's where we're focused.
And I guess you kind of talked about the commercialization, if you like, that usability is critical, because you might have the best tech in the world, but if it's not user-friendly, you're not going to get the adoption, you're not going to be able to drive into those markets. So I guess that's key to kind of everything.
It is, and particularly with AI, it's around inspectability of the result. So I could generate a result that says, yes, you need referral to a specialist today. Do you trust it?
Yeah.
Do you know why it's come up with that answer? And that's one of the unique features of using comparative judgment artificial intelligence, is that the system can tell you why it thinks you're a referral case for urgent need of therapy or not. Whereas the little black box systems that just blip up your normal or your abnormal
Yep.
There's too much uncertainty left in the mind of the clinician, so they don't tend to adopt. It's only when they can understand the thinking of the machine do they feel confident.
Well, I suppose they've got to sit in front of a patient as well and explain why, or what's going on. So you've got to have that understanding and that sharing of knowledge, haven't you?
Yeah, and as an ex-clinician, I wouldn't have wanted to sit in a clinic and deliver someone else's diagnosis. I would have wanted to deliver the one that I felt confident in.
Absolutely. No, absolutely fundamental.
Sure.
So those have been the key milestones. Kind of what challenges or barriers have you faced to date, or kind of what have been the downsides to date, I guess?
Yeah,
probably numerous on a daily basis.
Well, no, I don't think they are.
Okay, good.
I think there are some barriers around investment right now. I think the market is really challenging. I think it's difficult given the high interest rate environment for people to raise debt in businesses. So equity tends to linger longer, and therefore that money, that cycle of equity being released and then put back into the next business is perhaps currently missing, or at least at best challenging. So we've had some fun raising investment. I think if you think of artificial intelligence right now, you think of ChatGPT. So you're probably thinking of Microsoft, OpenAI, NVIDIA. You're probably thinking a little bit about Apple and people like Google. And therefore, who are these guys? 7 guys or whatever who are spun out of a university. They're not going to challenge Google and Apple. But in reality, the innovation happens at a relatively small level and is often acquired by these companies. And we've been accepted onto the NVIDIA Inception program, recognizing that that's where the cutting edge innovation happens. And then, the chipsets designed by NVIDIA or the acquisition by Google, comes along later. I'm not suggesting that Google are going to acquire us, by the way, anytime soon. But
we have no guarantees. We have no guarantees on this podcast. Don't worry, Steve. That's fine.
But I mean, it'd be nice. But no, you've got to persuade people that actually the big thinking comes from those people that are free to think, and they are university academics. Then you develop the product into a state that it can actually be utilized and pushed into markets. And that's when, perhaps it gets acquired by one of these bigger players and becomes the sort of recognizable stock price on the NASDAQ or on the FTSE or whatever. But, if you invest in those products that are out there, those big companies today, you'll expect some growth, but you're not going to expect the multiples that you get from investing in small stage companies and the huge value that they can generate if they get it right. And persuading people of that is often the challenge of the SME CEO. That's my challenge today. I guess the other thing is around differentiating the product. There are competitors out there. They generally work on deep learning, so they're looking for features on images, identifying those features. We're not doing that at all. As I say, our AI is a complete revolution in how you do image interpretation, whether it's in radiology or ophthalmology or any of these healthcare specialties. And getting that articulation across that we're not going to do it the same way everyone else is doing it because everybody else is going down the wrong road. That also represents a bit of a challenge. Well, hey, we're up for the challenges, or we wouldn't be here.
Absolutely. It just makes it an additional, I guess, communication challenge, doesn't it? Because you'll be going into meetings where there'll be some preconception about what you do, and you almost have to dismantle that preconception before you can build it back up again.
You do, and you need resilience when you go in and face that sort of, well, everybody else does it this other way. You've got to be able to just keep articulating the message that, well, that's great. You let them go down that road, and then we'll just go steal the market with the best product available.
Yeah, absolutely. So, kind of, you talked through. I completely agree with your point about challenging, challenging environment for fundraising, etc. In the market, we are seeing that. We've consciously aiming to support our existing portfolio to make sure they're well capitalized when fundraising is tough. But then that has a knock-on effect. Most VCs will be doing exactly the same thing. So it means there's less capital coming into the market for new things, etc. So I completely get that and I completely understand that. In the wider kind of early stage ecosystem, particularly in the northwest of England where you're based, etc., what have you benefited from, or what support have you had kind of along the journey to date?
There's obviously a network of VCs across the Northwest, in fact, across the Northern Powerhouse.
Yep.
There's a whole network of VCs, and we obviously speak to them. There's events and various things that are held where you can interact with these guys. Some of them have a stronger life science and healthcare portfolio, like Deepbridge. Others less so, and it's more of a sort of left field ask to them. I mean, sitting a tier behind that, there's obviously grant funding, and our guys were lucky enough to secure NIHR funding for their research, and there's an awful lot of sort of Innovate UK money that's floating around. So I guess there's a bunch of things in the Northwest that we're able to access. We've been lucky enough to secure investment from Deepbridge Capital, which is what we need to take us into those next steps of regulatory approval, market access, finding the right distributors and partners to work with, and that's what we're concentrating on now.
Brilliant. And we touched on that before, the kind of the academic versus commercial world. I mean, a spin out from university, has that been quite a straightforward process? And working with the university, has that been quite an easy process for you on the commercialization side of the business?
So their processes typically aren't fantastically fast, in that you can imagine you're presenting to an enterprise board of some, let's say, 20 people. I'm plucking the number off the top of my head. And to get them together, it's probably going to happen at best on a monthly basis, probably more like a quarterly basis. And yet startups and SMEs, they want to work on a minute by minute basis. So to wait for a quarter to get approval, or even worse, to then find out that you'll be approved at the following meeting after a period of consideration. It can be seen as frustrating. In reality, the university have been really helpful. They elected to appoint a board member that wasn't a university employee, but was actually somebody with experience in the ophthalmology field, so that they were, we were benefiting and they were benefiting from that experience and knowledge. So I can't really fault them. They also invested with a seed funding, which is helpful, because that got us moving. That got us through the legal setup costs of, putting the business in place, etc. So no, I can't fault them, really.
Brilliant. And I guess when you're starting out, is having that support from all sides that kind of gets you going. Can you tell us a bit more about the diabetes market and how this has changed over recent years? Why is it ripe for innovation? You've touched on it before about kind of existing kind of technologies not necessarily doing the same thing that you want to be doing, but can you tell us a bit more about why the market is so ripe for innovation?
So the number of people with diabetes is unfortunately rising dramatically. So as what we previously termed underdeveloped countries have started to develop a middle class and diets are westernizing, unfortunately, the rates of diabetes skyrocket. And so globally, this is a massive problem. I mean, there are hundreds of millions of people suffering with diabetes. And it's a relatively silent killer in a way. It causes small blood vessel disease, so end organ diseases. So it affects your kidneys, your muscles, and the tips of your limbs, but it also affects your eyes. And so that's why from literally nowhere you see diabetic retinopathy sweeping to become the leading cause of blindness. And with that huge demographic change, if you like, in the prevalence of diabetes globally, we've got to do something to address that. Now, I'm all for prevention is better than cure. So let's do something around that westernized diet, and let's reduce the amount of sugary stuff we all eat, and maybe increase a bit of fiber, and putting that aside, given the fact that we've got an immediate problem, it's a ripe space to innovate, because you've got a huge market to share with other competitors and providers. You've got a captive audience, because most people these days are quite educated about their health. Absolutely. They really want to, improve their chances of whatever it is, not going blind, not developing kidney failure, keeping fit and healthy. So I think it's the perfect environment to be working in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's it's got all the tick boxes, if you like, from a sector which is continuing to grow, which is a global problem, as you alluded to, which is great. You touched on it before, but kind of why Deepbridge? Why have you chosen to partner with Deepbridge for your funding, and how's that been to date? This is the bit where you have to be nice, Steve. This is the nice bit. Yeah.
No, they've been great. They've got a great health and life sciences portfolio. So they've got the experience. They've been through the process with other firms.
Yep.
They know how the market works. They've elected to put somebody on the board who's got a life sciences background,
Yep.
who's been through the mill, grown a few companies, studied these particular subjects in the past. So they're not just investing a bit of money and then walking away and hoping that turns into a return. They're actually invested in our company doing well and make relevant introductions to all kinds of people in the market. So it's a much more invested investor.
Brilliant. And I guess sometimes it's down to the simple things of having somebody on the board who understands the acronyms and the abbreviations in the sector, I guess. Is
exactly.
Part
and if in healthcare we've got so many
absolutely.
of those.
Yeah, absolutely. I often spend a lot of time Googling when I've read board papers, but anyway, that's, anyway, good. So what are the next steps? What are your next goals? Kind of, what are you working on? Kind of, what's the next few months and so on look like?
So from the academic half of the exec team, we're really focused on regulation.
Yep.
So we've got a product that we know works, superb. Now we need to tell a regulator that it works, and it works in a safe and compliant way. So while we've got clinical trials that show that it's efficacious,
yep.
we need commercial trials to show that if you were to put it into commercial use, that it would be used safely and appropriately. And that's what those guys are focused on right now. And as soon as we can get those CE marks, the MHRA approval, the FDA approval to work in the United States, so much the better, because that just gives us that badge to be able to go in and sell in those markets. So that's what that side of the execs team is working on. On the other side, we're very much focused on early adopters, first customers, distributors. What sort of markets are going to give us the best impact and best return for shareholders, and that's really what we're spending our time doing, talking to other healthcare providers who have a vested interest in seeing this in the marketplace.
And is it? I mean, we see so many. I guess that we see so many kind of early stage companies in the med tech, life sciences, the diagnostic space. That the US is kind of the nirvana, is the dream to kind of get into the US market. Is that the same for you guys, or what kind of finger in the air? Kind of what would that future market look like for you?
I mean, the US is the biggest market in the world, right? And for healthcare, it's the spend per GDP per capita is phenomenal in the US. But in reality, everybody in the US with a problem, the ophthalmologist wants to see them because they can get remunerated for that interaction, because that's how they get paid by the insurance companies. We're much more about finding markets where you've got a limited number of ophthalmologists. Let's just use the UK as an example, and to see everybody would swamp the system. So we've got to find a way to find the patients who desperately need the interventions to save their sights and get them in front of an ophthalmologist to get that intervention. And so they're the markets where I think we'll have the most impact. So right across Europe, all the way from Eastern Europe, right through Western Europe, Northern Europe, I think we are a great fit. The WHO is currently working out in Central Asia. So all of the Uzbekistans, etc. And I think that's they're quite widely spread populations, so quite difficult to manage in screening programs, and therefore we might be able to add significant value there. But there's absolutely no reason why we wouldn't be in Canada, Australia. You think of a nation, we can probably add value.
Awesome. So kind of on a personal note, in terms of kind of where you've come from and like you said, your unique background, if you like, but what would be your advice that you'd give to entrepreneurs, particularly in the med tech space and kind of where you are? What kind of advice would you give to people starting out tomorrow, I guess?
I suppose entrepreneurs it's a funny term, isn't it? Because I certainly don't label myself as an entrepreneur, but there are lots of people that do. They tend to have the idea and have run ahead of the crowd and are excited by their idea, and probably are doing nearly everything themselves. And I would suggest that you need a team around you. There's enough friction in trying to take something to market where if you're not absolutely expert at each of the various specialisms that are required, whether it's finance or commercial, legal, whatever. You go find people that you can put in your team around you to reduce that friction as much as possible. They need to be able to do their job just so slick that you can fly and concentrate on what it is that you want to be doing, which is telling people how amazing the product is and getting it out there.
Absolutely.
And I suppose resilience, because if there's friction, then there's going to be disappointment, there's going to be pushbacks, there's going to be complexity around some of these things. And if you're not resilient, you're probably going to fall over and give up. So don't, get back up, keep pushing forwards and get your product to market.
I think that's great advice. And I think, the team is particularly important. Nobody is an expert in all things, and it's making sure you've got that right support for the right times.
Absolutely not. Surround yourself with the best people better than you are.
Yeah, absolutely. That's always my mantra, and it's not usually hard, so that's good. So away from managing a scaling business, these podcasts, we like to bring to life the people behind kind of the investments that we invest in. So what are your interests? Kind of what do you do away from the 24-hour job of scaling a business?
I'm a pretty regular guy, I guess. I have a family, spend most of my free time with them. Yep. The dog. I enjoy cooking. I have a fascination for motorsport, which I feel very guilty about because it's probably not very environmentally friendly.
It's improving. So that's good.
We did race some go-karts a few years ago, but my son's grown up now and moved on, so we don't do that anymore. But I enjoy reading. Yep. Cinema, all the usual stuff. Really.
Just find the downtime from the day-to-day stresses, I guess. But good. So again, the question that we ask all of our guests, and everyone hates it when we pose these questions to them beforehand, but if you were to invite 3 guests to the Deepbridge dinner party, dead or alive, but can't be family or friends because we don't upset anybody you don't invite, who would they be and why?
If we stick with the themes of the conversation, then if we're talking about resilience, then I think you should invite Katerina Thompson-Johnson. Because she won gold a couple of days ago in the heptathlon, having previously had a few seasons where she wasn't performing because of injury, etc. So I think quite a few people had written her off as a heptathlete, and for her to come back and win gold.
So many knockbacks.
It was quite inspiring to watch, to be honest.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Absolutely. Yeah. Brilliant.
And she's local. She doesn't live far away, so it wouldn't be far for her to travel. She could pick the wine on the way.
Nobody's put logistics into this question before, I have to say, Steve, but that's good. I like that. That's it.
Think about everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
If we were talking about career change, because I am fascinated by the fact that I made a career change that was quite so sweeping, and I think people think I was probably quite mad to do so. Then I wonder if we'd be allowed to invite Vladimir Zelensky, because to go from being a comic actor to running a country is a big step, but then to run a country that is actually having quite a challenging time for all the reasons that we know. I'd just love to hear his thoughts on just career change and how, is he faking it till he makes it? I think he's already made it. He seems to be doing an exceptional job of keeping his country together in what is definitely challenging circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely. But I guess also that there'll be interesting things there about actually what skills he's taken from the world of acting, etc., to actually be, I guess, the one of the most recognised faces on the planet currently.
Yeah, and surviving under that pressure. Yeah, the guy's thriving under it rather than surviving. It's interesting to watch. Yep. And I guess we need somebody to tell some good stories. So I indicated I liked reading. So it's a bit of a guilty pleasure, but Ben Mesrick is a great author who writes stories about startups and financial success and that sort of stuff. And it'd be quite fun to hear what he's working on and what's coming next in his series of books. So maybe somebody like that. And also where he gets his inspiration from, because there must be things taken from real life there in terms of some of the things that go wrong as well as the successes. No, that would be fascinating. You're going to have someone to tell stories at dinner, otherwise it'd be quite boring. Absolutely. This is very true. Very true. Excellent. Steve, really appreciate your time. Loved catching up with you, and we look forward to catching up with you in future.
Thank you for joining us. If you have any topics you'd like covering in future Deepbridge Discovery podcasts, please email us at discovery@deepbridgecapital.com. This podcast was brought to you by Deepbridge Capital LLP. Deepbridge is authorised and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. Please note that investments discussed are both illiquid and high risk and won't be suitable for all investors and should be considered as part of a diversified portfolio. The content of this podcast should not be construed as financial or taxation advice. We recommend investors seek appropriate professional financial advice. Any views expressed may no longer be current and may have already been acted upon.